good to know.
Yes. Well, still a bit jarring, but yes, this meeting is being recorded. So we are on another of the minor prophets. It depends on where you grew up, on what kind of background you have, whether you...
Recording in progress.
Oh, here, that was strange. It depends whether you say Habakkuk or Habakkuk. Since he's no longer around to object either way, I don't think it really matters. But I am a little surprised that this book is not more often dealt with in the church. Because unlike, right, last week's Nahum, where you kind of have to work really hard to sift out what people could relate to in it, Habakkuk is not that hard to relate to. First off, we don't know who he was. His name is mentioned only twice in the Bible, and both in this book. He's not given a hometown. He's not giving a father's name. Nothing. He is just Habakkuk the prophet. And again, since we don't know where he lived, all we know is approximately when this might have taken place, and they think he might have been a contemporary of Nahum and Jeremiah. But the thing about this book is that who does it address? Who is his audience? To whom is he speaking? The only person he addresses in the entire book is God. It is a dialogue between the prophet and his God, between a righteous man living in a wicked culture and the God who he knows is holy and cannot tolerate wickedness, and yet. So let's look at the outline. It's set up actually really easily to follow. You have his first complaint and God's answer to that complaint, his second complaint, God's answer to that complaint, and then a prayer at the end. So starting in chapter 1, right, his first complaint. I want you to listen to this and tell me whether you can identify with this. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear, or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. That sounds a bit familiar. Around this time, and you can go back to the books of Kings and Chronicles to confirm this, but Judah had had two extraordinarily evil kings. And then they had one last good king and one very short-lived revival before everything slid downhill again, terminally. You have a man here who asks God, why won't you do anything about the wickedness I see around me? Why do you not judge the evil? And God's answer is, basically, my answer will be so radically new that you will not recognize it at first as my answer. I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. All right, well, okay. So tell me, see if I believe it. So he does. He says, I'm raising up the Chaldeans, right? Babylonian Empire. And he describes them in terms that are not at all comforting to uh, a Judean and not at all complimentary to a Chaldean. Bitter, hasty, seizing dwellings not their own, dreaded and fearsome. They come for violence. They gather captives like sand. They sweep by like the wind and go on, guilty men whose own might is their God. And Habakkuk says, that was not what I had in mind when I asked you to respond to our evil. Second complaint, right? How could you possibly remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? So he's saying, basically, I know that Judah is pretty bad, but Babylon is worse. How can you possibly use such an evil nation for your purposes? Are you not going to judge them also? And he ends this complaint with something that I find fairly notable. Chapter 2, verse 1. I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. He is looking to God, confident that God will answer even a complaint. That this will not break their fellowship. And the Lord does answer to him, and he commands him to write down the vision. But he says, for still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end, it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. He says, how long will you overlook the violence and wickedness of Judah? God says, I haven't. In fact, I'm raising up against them the Chaldeans. The second time he says, well, are you just going to stand by and watch the Chaldeans, those absolutely horrible, wicked people, swallow up the Judeans who are not nearly as bad as they are? And he says, wait for it. Now, there's a verse in the midst of all this that will be very significant for us. Habakkuk 2, verse 4. Behold, his soul is puffed up, it is not upright within him, referring to the Babylonian king. But the righteous shall live by faith. And then he follows with a series of woes upon that wicked nation that he himself intends to use to discipline Judah. He is saying, basically, woe to him who takes what isn't his own, for how long? Because suddenly they will become debtors themselves. They will fall into debt, and those they owe will suddenly arise and become their plunderers. So it's like, just wait. And of course, if you know the history of Israel, they had to wait decades. They had to wait generations before they saw the final downfall of one conqueror, only to be overtaken by another and another. But the principle here is that God's judgment may seem slow. It might seem like it's never coming. But he says, wait for it. Because it will come in his time, not ours. So his answer is that he will deal with all these things in his own time. But in the meantime, those who belong to him, those who trust in him, will have to live by faith in him. And this passage ends with a verse that I have always found rather beautiful. The end of chapter 2. He's talking about the worthlessness of idols, things made for worship. And it's contrasted with verse 20. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. And Habakkuk responds with a prayer of worship and of trust. O Lord, I have heard the report of you, and your work, O Lord, do I fear. In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. His prayer is that he has remembered what God has done in the past. There's a poetic description of when God led his people out of Egypt and the power that he showed in that. And he says, this is his response now to his own situation and the choice that he has made. Chapter 3, verse 16. I hear, and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us. He has heard the warning that they will be punished, that disaster will come upon them. And he says, I will quietly wait for the day that you've promised, that through all of this horror, you will then come for us. And the coda to all of this has become something rather important to me. Verses 17 through 19. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food. The flocks be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on my high places. Even if everything around us fails, we still have a choice. Will we rejoice in the Lord? Or will we reject him? That's one of the things that I think the modern church has missed out on by not paying more attention to this book, because it is a powerful reminder that God's ways are not our ways, and his timing isn't our timing. That we are called to wait upon the Lord, right? There is almost nothing worse to people today than telling them to wait. Now, I want now. Is it now? How about now? But we're called to wait on the Lord, to remember what he has done and trust that he will continue as he began. And that is linked to another theme in Habakkuk. That verse, the Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silent before him. We have a tendency to multiply words, but there is a place in worship for silence. That the Lord is present. And sometimes the thing that we can do to honor him the most is just to keep quiet and to wait on him. Silence is tied here to reverence. It's a concept we have a hard time with. We revere nobody. We don't revere people in authority. You hear people talk, I mean, like, sort of despising them, calling them by last name as if they were, in previous eras, this would be as if they were your subordinate or your inferior. We don't respect elders. You see what some people have, said to the, and the way they treat older people. We revere no one unless it's somebody we want to be like, or somebody that we consider worthy. I'm amazed and often appalled by people who are considered worthy by the culture at large. And it's the church's responsibility to model reverence to God. I don't know if we do that. And then there's that theme, which is our primary New Testament link to this book. The righteous shall live by faith. It actually quoted 3 times in the New Testament. First time is in Romans chapter 1, after Paul says, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For in it, the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. As it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. In that case, the emphasis he gives it is that the righteousness of God through the gospel is revealed to us, is bestowed upon us, as long as we continue in faith. It's not through the law, but through trust. The second time is Galatians chapter 3. Verse 11. Now it is evident that no one is justified before God by the law, for the righteous shall live by faith. Again, it's not keeping the rules, particularly the law, 600 plus ordinances given, but it is by faith. And the third time is Hebrews 10, verse 38, where the writer to the Hebrews is talking about endurance. And he quotes, well, he sort of paraphrases from Habakkuk, yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay. You remember, wait for it, though it seems slow, it will not delay. But my righteous one shall live by faith. And he adds, if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. So in this case, it is faith that endures, even without direct sight to confirm it. Faith holds on until the promise is fulfilled. So there we have our introduction, and in some cases reintroduction, to the book of Habakkuk.